Ready when you are.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for today's Wednesday Zoom and Learn. Today we are talking everything solar. So we hope to give you some tidbits pertaining to solar, answer a lot of your questions, clarify a lot of things, and hopefully after this Zoom, you'll have a better understanding of the options that your clients have when they want to sell or when they want to buy a house that has solar on it. So Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to 2021. Still in crazy times. Today has been pretty chaotic all morning, as most of you have probably been watching. But we're glad that you joined us, and we hope we can drop some knowledge for you. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Tommy Dutcher. I'm the area sales manager for California Title. And I am one half of the co-host of our Zoom and Learns on Wednesday. And my other half is?
Mary Jane Morris with Granite Escrow. I'm the VP of Sales for Temecula and Riverside County. One of the benefits Granite Escrow specifically asked me to bring when I was recruited was a broker level understanding of things that escrow generally tries to stay out of. We know a lot more than we can say often. We are often prohibited or for some reason not included in some decision making as well. So solar's a complicated issue. I want to again send our well wishes to Washington D.C. Right now, and whatever side of that coin you're on. I'm sure that we are hoping for a quick and peaceful resolution there. So I'll send that out first. My name is Mary Jane. I'm the VP of Sales for Granite Escrow. I'm a retired escrow officer. This last September, I celebrated my 40th year in the business. 20 of those years I was an escrow officer, and 20 of those years I was a non-competing broker at various agencies in San Diego and Temecula. I also owned a TC company at one time that did about 700 files a year before it was sold off a couple of years ago. And now I've returned to my first love, escrow, right back where I started. So I'm happy to be with Granite Escrow for their safety record, for being a leader in how to operate during COVID. For many reasons, I'm happy to be with Granite, and one of them is Miss Tracy here down in there.
Oh, thank you.
All right, I want to talk about solar a little bit today. First of all, my disclaimer is I'm not a solar purchasing expert, meaning I don't know why you all make the decision, why any one of us makes the decision we make, whether we. I know when we bought our solar about 3 years ago, I was firmly in the court that I had to own it 100%. There was going to be no leasing, we didn't even entertain any conversations about those. Although I can see why many people do consider leases because you don't really realize that you guaranteed them 18 years or 20 years on your roof, renting your roof from you. They do limit your energy costs to a certain degree, but there's drawbacks on both sides. So just to get us started, I would like to take a look at the 3 different type of solar contracts that are most common out there. And once again, my thanks go to Tommy for always keeping my media up.
How's that?
The 3 most common types of solar that you're going to see are a straight lease, which is similar to leasing a car. They provide all the equipment at no cost, and they maintain it, and there's no tax qualifications to qualify. The bad side of that is, and this will go on, many of these repeat for the lease and the power purchase agreement, which is the middle one. They have a limited portion, you only get a limited portion of the energy you create. You're not building any equity in that system. It's straight going to have to be renewed or removed at the end of the term. There is a built-in nearly 3% escalator, meaning your electric bill will double over 25 years. And perhaps over 25 years it should double, but that's a pretty big promise to make going in. They have a very low production guarantee. They're not shopping for your roof the same way you would shop for your roof. So they have corporate goals, and they know what they need in the area, and so the production guarantee is not there. Moving from the home is nearly impossible without finding somebody to take over leases. Now, most of us want solar, and so when we say we have solar, it tends to be a benefit emotionally, if not completely financially. A lease and a PPA, the power purchase agreement, have the same benefits per se, except that you are paying a limited amount, meaning you instead of your bill fluctuating month to month, it is going to stay a nice stable 150, 160, whatever the number is. And some people prefer to know what that limited amount is. Of course, ownership is the very best of these three options. You own it, you get all the upsides, you turn your power bill into an asset. This is the only type that increases the value of your home because you actually own it. It doesn't belong to someone else. It also does not come with the strings that someone else has a lien on the property and a right to your roof for the remainder of the remaining of the contract. Your monthly payment is fixed, and then once your loan is paid off, you get years of free, and plus you get all the tax credit. So these are the basic types. The next language I would like us to have in common before we move on, and I have to tell you that in the last, probably coming up on 2 years now, I would have said 18 months because it's pretty regular happening now, I have cleaned up 11 different solar messes, either just before close, just after close, months after close, and it takes quite a bit. And on top of that, one of the first things a broker looks at is the size of the claim. So a person who's screaming at me may still only have a $200 claim versus a person who's speaking very gently to me but has a $30,000 solar claim. So it's not always in correlation to how much the claim is. So I have to automatically presume I'm in the $30,000 range on a claim every time this comes up. That exceeds small claims court. That exceeds, you're definitely going to be putting down your deductible on your E&O. You're definitely going to spend a couple of years potentially working it out, especially with COVID going on right now and limited access to all those mediation, arbitration, court, even full-blown court. So the next language I wanted, so one of the things that surprised me, especially as an escrow officer, was like many of you coming in today, I assumed escrow handled it always. Solar was not a thing when I was an escrow officer, so it just didn't come up. I never had to do it myself. So, and because I was aware that some solars are being done by escrow, I presumed all of them were being done by escrow. And through this last 2 years of educating myself and sorting out these claims, I have had to get to the bottom of why an escrow did or did not handle the entire thing start to finish. So one of the first myths I want to dispel is that escrow is in charge of solar. As much as service-oriented as I am, as much free stuff as I like to give, and as much glory as there could be to a good job done well on this matter, the next few things I'm going to tell you are going to explain to you why escrow can't be in charge of it. Therefore, it is going to fall on the familiar role we all have, which is the seller disclosures and the buyer inspects. So this is very important that a listing agent or a seller get a top of this situation right from the very beginning. Well, there we have problem number one. When these failures occur, it is often been expected that the realtor or the escrow know more than the seller does about the condition of the solar, what kind of solar it is, how it's going to be paid off, what the options are. Tommy just looked away for a second and happened to remind me that this is intended to be a conversation. So if at any time you want to throw a question at us, Tommy will be watching the chat, and then, or unmute yourself and let me know. So the number one problem we have is the seller doesn't know what he has. I just did a sign up for Granite with the seller's escrow package, and I asked them if they had solar, and he said, yes, we have paid off solar. He did not remotely have a paid off solar. He had a power purchase agreement with an average bill of about $160, which was current. There was no money owed on the power purchase agreement except for a transfer fee of, I think, about $250, something like $250, $500. There was nothing else owed. But had any of us taken that advice straight out of the seller's mouth that he had a paid off solar, we're in a completely different world than we would be in something that needs paid off or transferred or disclosed properly. So I wanted to get one more kind of a common language in your head before we go on to the next. So if we're doing a lease or a power purchase agreement, the seller must, I'm gonna go over specifically what the solar companies want you to do here in a minute, but the first thing a listing agent needs to know, besides the misinformation that sellers have in their head, is where is that contract? You could reach out to they can reach out to their solar company. Anybody who's bought solar knows you get a notebook about that thick with every kind of spec and things in it, but nobody ever seems to have it. Or they're packed up and they don't know where it is. At the very least, somebody has a copy of that purchase or the contract they're on. The best part of getting the actual contract is you know what you got. It says right at the top, power purchase agreement, and it has everything. It has the specs of what's on the roof. It says what maintenance is going to come, how long is left, the escalator clause that we talked about. It's going to have everything you need to disclose, which then leaves, does the buyer want to assume the existing as it stands, and or would they like to consider a payoff, which we'll talk about a little bit further down the road, because even leases can be paid off. I went through this recently myself. So a straight transfer where they're just going to assume exactly what's there, and other than a transfer fee, escrow's not going to do this transfer at all. They're not going to touch it at all. The seller and buyer are going to have to reach out to that solar company. Seller's going to say, I have an incoming buyer. The buyer's going to call and say, I am that incoming buyer. And then he's going to go through the procedure with the company to get himself to be qualified, including a credit check, which you have to be very careful of if your buyer is on the edge financially, that credit check doesn't trigger their credit score to take any sort of dive. So a straight transfer, escrow doesn't have to do anything. There's nothing escrow has to do. Seller and buyer have to contact them. They still have to call them at the end of the transaction and tell them that we're wrapped up. And then the most recent one we did, they sent us what we needed as far as the transfer fee that we were going to pay in escrow or something. And then they mentioned in their letter, which is what the title company was able to stand on, that they would not release this lien until the new person came in, because until there's a sale, there's no transfer. So that transfer actually came after the official transfer into the person's name, actually came after close of escrow, and however long it took those parties to call and finish up. So as I said previously, as service oriented as I am, and as much as I wish we had a procedure that we took these all the time, we just don't. So I wanted you to know that.
And a big example of that, we have a lot of those in the city of Menifee, where the builders were forced to put small solar systems on every house, right? They have the option to increase them, but every house has a minimum of X amount of panels. Those services is exactly what MJ's talking about right there. Is that process is not going to fall on escrow. It really has to fall on the seller going out and the buyer coming in. And there's a lot of small paperwork that the solar companies need. I'm on a file right now where Tesla is the supplier, and Tesla's messed up like 4 times, right? They've requested things, they sent documents in, and it just fell on deaf ears and it never got done. And they're still trying to deal with it, even though, you know, they plan on closing here this week. So it is a process, and it's a process that needs to be done at the front end of your transaction. Don't wait till the back half of your transaction, because some of these solar companies do not react very quickly.
Right now, because of the refi craze, 90% of solar transfers are subordinations, where they are literally agreeing to, when a first mortgage gets paid off, any lien behind them should bounce into a higher position. A solar is being asked to subordinate. There's nothing in it for them except paperwork and time. Our personal refi this year had to be extended 4 times to get the subordination company out, paperwork out of the company. They are flat out buried now. When I have to make a fuss, I dig up the CEO's number and I start at the CEO. And every person I speak to, from the moment I start till I'm done, I tell them that if I'm not able to resolve and move to the next problem, I'm going to pick up this phone and keep dialing. The very last fight that I had with the solar company just recently, I literally told them every single time this call disconnects, if I'm not happy, I'm picking up again. And I will go all the way up the chain to the CEO. All of a sudden they broke loose and I got what I needed, because the CEO simply called down the chain and said, give her what she wants, make her go away. So instead of calling me back, but it took that level of, and I would have. I mean, there are days in our business, we've all been there, where you are going to sit on the phone all day solving a problem, even though you're just banging your head on it, banging your head on it, banging your head on it. And one of the things I teach all my agents is that courtesy wins always. It doesn't with solar. You really have to there's a certain rage that happens even to the calmest of persons dealing with these companies, all the way up to. So unless you're pushing the button that says you want to buy a new solar system, you are way down the line right now if you are trying to do just a straight transfer. Now, the second language I want us to have, so you're clear that a straight transfer, escrow has nothing to do with, unless there's a lien on the title, at which case they will be involved enough to put it on and take it off sufficiently to accomplish. But even the most aggressive escrow officers we have, and that goes right up to me, are having trouble getting through to the solar companies. So it's very bad. So the next kind I want to talk to you about is we are going to pay it off. It is a seller-owned system, or it's a lease that is qualified to be bought down. And we're going to talk about buy down very briefly at the end. Both the lease and the power purchase agreements, they can factor out an 8-year average and charge you. And I added this, maybe I won't even get to the slide because of how much we have to do, but I added it to the, I had Tommy add it to, it says that to buy out a lease, the average is $7,000 to $14,000, which is still an outrageous number considering it's a lease, $7,000 to $14,000, but still may be cheaper than making payments if you're making lease payments, or if your buyer absolutely will not buy the house with that solar on it. Of course, we have a little less of that right now because we have such a shortage of homes right now. So if there's actually going to be a payoff or a lien has to be removed, escrow will be involved. That amount is negotiated in at contract. One of the ones that took me nearly 18 months to clean up, the seller had told the listing agent that she intended to pay off the solar at close. Therefore, the listing agent pitched on the MLS a paid off solar. They did not put it in the contract because they believed they already understood that the seller was going to take care of that debt. They didn't put it in the contract. And the only proof I had when I came to the cleanup position was the seller had written on the SPQ that she intended to pay off the solar at close of escrow. Not in the listing agreement, not in the MLS, nowhere else. And that's what I hung my hat on. While I was helping settle that case, I'm hoping, and this is what I'm operating as a broker, as I'm trying to settle that, I'm trying to make sure that hopefully the buyer never notices that he didn't get a paid off solar. What he got was a paid off purchase agreement with 14 more years on it. And at any point, he's going to figure it out and realize that, yes, he did get 14 or 18, I forget what was left, 16, whatever it was, years of power at a certain rate. But his rate's going to be doubling over the time, and he did not get a paid off solar. And that, so even though we were able to get the seller to agree to do the buy down on the power purchase agreement and get him successfully transferred after 18 months, he did not get a paid off solar, which is what he was promised in that contract. So that's one of those files that's going to be out there anytime in 3 years. He could pop up and ask for his solar. So if there's a payoff or a lien that needs to be removed, escrow will help with it. They will reach out to the solar company. It's not that we don't want to reach out to the solar company, it's that they don't want to talk to us. Many of these solar companies now have procedures in place, and I'm going to show you the very next slide that we go to. We're going to talk about that as soon as I get past these standard explanations. Again, if a solar is going, so I'm sorry, I lost track of my thought there for a second. So if we're paying off, we will participate in the transfer to the best of our ability, meaning we'll try to get you the forms, we'll try to follow up, we'll try to say it's done or it's not done, we'll try to tell you when it's in trouble, we will do those kinds of things. But again, because it's become between the seller and the buyer, it's not necessarily something escrow's even going to be able to have happen. Part of the reason that Tommy and I wanted to do this class is because we keep such a nice library of these for you guys so that you can show them to your clients, you can go over them again, you can recommend them. It was very important that we get solar out there because the number of claims is just through the roof.
Especially in today's environment, right?
Right.
I mean, in today's environment, with limited offices operating at full capacity, everything is taking twice as long. And that's why I can't emphasize enough to say a listing agent, when you go in and you're talking to your clients to get that listing, does your property have solar on it, should be a standardized question. Because there are a lot of times where they're finding out there's solar on the property like a week in, 2 weeks in.
Right. And
because they got a home inspection that showed, hey, there's solar here.
You are subject to the same disclosure laws for solar as you are as your TDS, your SPQ, all those sort of things. I wish I had typed this up, and because we're recording, I'm going to go ahead and say it maybe once, maybe twice, maybe Tommy will get lucky and write it down for me as we go. This is a clause that I've asked all our agents, when I'm the broker, this is a clause that I want to see in every purchase contract. Seller to disclose any leased or liened items within the same time period as paragraph 14, and seller to pay any outstanding balances. This will cause the listing agent, one, to remember that they have something they need to negotiate with you, which is the biggest problem that we have. And second of all, it sets in motion that you have already said, oh, we're not paying for that. Now, of course, anything can come back to the table, and there may be some good reason that you later negotiate, you will pay for the solar. But if you're going to get hit with a solar out of the blue, if you have this line in your purchase contract, seller to provide disclosure of any leased or liened items Yes, we're going to talk about that, Wendy, about how much value solar adds or doesn't add. So seller to provide a disclosure for any leased or liened items. And by the way, the solar is not the only one that burns us. Water softener systems, alarm systems, air conditioning, PACE loans. These are all, no matter, so especially when he says, yes, I have a solar, but I put it on my PACE. I did a PACE loan and it's on my taxes now. So it's going to have to be paid off, especially if there's an FHA or VA loan coming in. They don't allow them to stand any longer. They can't be assumed any longer. So 2 out of the 3 times that you're going to have solar, escrow's not going to be your front runner. And it's, again, it's not because we don't want to be. In fact, it would be smoother if we could do it, if there were standard procedures like getting HOA docs and that sort of thing. So, so seller is responsible for disclosure, and the faster you can get your hands on that contract, if they don't have it, then somebody needs to call the solar company and get it. And 99% of these are going, lately have been leases or power purchase agreements. And once you disclose them, the buyer can decide for himself whether that the terms in that purchase contract are agreeable to be assumed. By the way, as a buyer's agent, so as a listing agent, I've cleared because we've disclosed, right? We gave you a full contract of everything was in there. If nobody reads it and the price goes up 3% over 25 years, the buyer's agent, I don't know, I've mentioned this case pretty often, which I can remember the other piece of it is, it's a client's name versus Century 21 Cloud and Furnace. Took it all the way to the California Supreme Court as to what a buyer's agent is supposed to run down and what they are not. And the Supreme Court found that buyer's agents are responsible for looking out for things that are obvious, let's start there, that are normal and that are unsettled, just like we do anything else. There's a leak in the front yard, where's it coming from? Why do we have a leak? Somebody needs to run it down. So I wanted to bring you back to the sellers disclose and buyers inspect. So having that, this general understanding of what escrow can and can't do and why not they can't do it. Tommy, may I have page 1 of the instructions of what, part 2 is very small. While I'm waiting for this, oh, this is, yeah, I'm sorry, there we go. Wendy mentioned that many people think that solar, the existence of solar at all increases the price on their property, and it does not. The most recent one that I was talking about where the seller did not realize when he told me he had it fully paid, the buyer had a bad experience with a lease. If they could have bought any house but ours with that lease, they would have. They took that lease because it was the only offer they got accepted on after 20, 30, 40, 50 offers. So the seller's presumption that they should add 10, 20, 30, 50, whatever the number is in their head is not correct, and certainly not when it applies to leases. There is some ownership value. I have to tell you, my personal experience, and I'm sure there are other people, and feel free to speak up, the value runs around $10,000. Is about what the benefit is, similar to what a pool generally would get you, not these amazing pools we have now, but your regular standard pool. So,
and I've even asked a handful of appraisers that question as well. What a solar add, and each of them said the same thing. They don't look at the value of the system or anything else. All they look at is what's the average electric bill on a property of X square footage in that area. And then they look at that and they times it by 12 and say, okay, the value is X. And they don't look at it on a 1 year, but that's how they gather the value of what that's worth is if it's a property where the electric bill is $500 on average a month, or if it's an electric bill where it's $100 a month on average for that area and that size house, they gather the value of it based on that.
as disclosure, many people are asking for 12 months of bills as well, energy bills as well. So you might as well go ahead and start preparing those as well when you do your disclosures. Is another item that it's going to come up and get requested.
Which isn't 12 months. I mean, it's just the cover sheet from Edison, because they track it and they show you a rolling 12-month and exactly what that bill was on one sheet. So it's real easy to get. As a listing agent, I'd recommend you put in your supplemental area of the MLS, so it's just there. Take the solar contract, put it in the supplemental area so it's there. Everything that they're going to be asking you the questions on, you might as well just apply it so that they can do their own homework with their client and not bug you because you don't have time to deal with it anyway.
So these are pretty simple, like pretty much covered. So these are the steps that you could give to your agent or to your disclosures. They need to notify the seller company that they're selling. They very often will be assigned a specialist for one person that's going to see them through. That is the only thing I have positive to say about Vivint Solar after my nightmare with them, was they had one person that I talked to until I couldn't anymore. So that was helpful. You need to connect your agent to the solar. That seller needs to connect the agent to the solar service company, meaning sign whatever it is so that the people can speak, so the agent, if necessary, can speak to the solar company. When you found an interested buyer, you're going to provide them a copy of the solar agreement. You're going to give them the contact number for the solar company. You're going to remind them that they need to call in and be pre-qualified for that. The buyer will need to show that solar agreement and the terms of that solar to the lender. The lender's laws require it to have a transferable warranty, meaning that they're not going to suddenly get stuck with a set of panels that aren't working, and that they suddenly have to recover, that they have to help with the recovery on. Also, the lender needs to add that to the debt to income ratio for the few dollars that's going to be there as well. Once the buyer receives the green light on their home loan, they're going to reach out to the solar lease transfer representative and request they send the transfer forms. You can ask for the transfer forms day one. You don't have to wait till your loan's approved. This is a solar company that wrote this. Can you tell? Wait till your loan's approved and then give us a call, and then we'll tell you 90 days from now whether you can have the deal or not. Then the solar's going to run a credit check. Please remember that on the agents that have buyers that are close to the bone on cost or credit score, that running a credit check may cause you a problem. The only time I've seen an appraiser change for a solar was on a owned system. The seller had maxed out the production. It was way beyond. She had 10 or 12 panels additional, and they did bump the value of the solar from 5 to 10. And by the way, they did that when she just called and asked. So there wasn't like a big formula to it either. She just said, I'm maxed out. I have 37 panels where everybody else has 20-ish panels, and the appraiser gave her a bump on that. Can I have the second small piece of this, Tommy? There's just one more little instruction here. We looked at that one. Here it is. The solar company is going to send a buyer a document confirming the buyer is approved. Now, escrow does get this off. If escrow is involved, we often find out, or somebody, if our information has been given to the solar company, sometimes once in a while they'll tell us it's not done. I wouldn't rely on them telling us anything. And then after you close escrow, you have to call and finalize the transfer. They do not consider you an owner of the property or anybody that even needs to be transferred until you have closed escrow. That leaves me with a very brief conversation about the buyouts on the solar lease. because the seller had intended in that one case I told you to pay off the solar, it was a power purchase agreement. And so if they truly intended to pay off the cost for that solar, and this was a home in Hemet, was $36,000 to the power purchase company to buy it out, meaning for the homeowner, the new homeowner, not to have to make any more monthly payments. It was about $8,000, and we did get the seller to agree to do that. So you can buy, many people don't know that you can buy out a lease. They call it a buy down or a buyout. And so I wanted to make sure you knew that if you really, if the seller's netting or there's good motivation and the buyer really doesn't want that situation, and we're in a different kind of environment where the buyers have some more say than they've had in the last year or so, you can buy out a lease. I wanted to talk about, and then I think I already showed the slide where it costs between $7,000 and $14,000. I wanted to talk to you about what happens when you have a non-existent seller, meaning somebody's passed away, vacant, nobody's lived there a long time, you have successor trustees, that sort of thing. We have very often had the home inspector, when he was on the roof, or somebody go on the roof, usually not the realtor, go on the roof and look for stickers and maintenance companies. And sometimes there's one on the, Tommy, what's the thing called in the garage?
Yeah, the kind of junction box, the
junction box.
Secondary power
sometimes
box.
Sometimes you literally have to do that kind of research where you are looking for who installed it. Is there something somewhere, a sticker or something that you can back it up, a serial number, something like that?
Sometimes we luck out and they've done maybe a refinance or something was done to where there was something recorded, and we can find it recorded somewhere. But very seldom do we find any recordings of solar stuff other than UCCs sometimes.
One of the common problems is solar companies are doing their own recordings of liens. We have had whole batches of liens that belong to Riverside County get accidentally recorded in San Diego, and vice versa. In fact, the one that I worked 18 months on, that solar company must have said to me 20 times, well, you couldn't have sold because we didn't release. I'm like, you didn't have a lien on the, well, we have a lien. Well, I'm not going to research where they recorded their lien, but it was definitely not on our PR and not on our chain of title. And the title company suggested to me that it had been recorded in the wrong county. Another situation is solar companies are being bought and sold and absorbed. We recently had the new solar company had the buyer sign a fresh contract, but they would not release the old contract. And that's another one I had to get the CEO involved. That was specifically the conversation where the CEO said, give her the $0 demand on the old one so she will go away. They were insisting because they had bought the company and signed a new contract, they had nothing to do with the old contract,
right.
Which was not true at all. So finishing my thought though about what you have to do if you have no idea or no one to tell you and no one to call. So because we've had this come up to 3-4 times now, I have located a source that I had Tommy put in the chat for you, Justin Lawson. He's been doing my solar classes for years. I didn't catch up with him this year to do this one, but he's also who we bought our solar from. And frankly, part of the reason I bought the solar from him, even after we took I'm married to an engineer, so believe me, we did price checks before we bought from what turned out to be a friend. But the reason I chose him was because I said, I know your number and I know where you live, and if I have a problem, I can come find you. It really made a difference to me. So he was my first call when I had one that I could not identify and there was no one to tell us. And he provides a little service around $500. He will come out and inspect the entire system and give you so that the buyer has an inspection. Remember, that's a buyer inspection, not a seller inspection, although everything's negotiable. They will come out. There are companies now, and I've heard other people say that they have a source, but this is a new tool you need in your tool belt. a solar person who's willing to come inspect unnamed systems and just give you an overall written report as to the condition of it. He goes one step further, and for a certain amount, and I don't remember what it was, a little more than the $500, but he will also do a 2 or 3 year warranty on his report. And with that, because there was no lien on the title, we closed escrow not knowing if anything was owed on that system. There was no lien, there was no company, there was nobody to chase. We had the buyer, the seller did choose to pay for this particular inspection to make the buyer comfortable. The buyer did choose the warranty and paid for that. And then my recommendation as broker is that the buyer sign off that this was the situation, and as it applies to this one thing, the agent can't be held responsible or the broker can't be held responsible, and we close escrow and everybody's happy. So even if there's nothing up there, even if you can't get you still have to do your work. You cannot fail to disclose or fail to inspect because there wasn't an easy way to do it. You have to try a little harder than that.
And I'll leave one thing as well is, looking at leases, because there's still a lot of them out there. Keep in mind, a lot of times there are 3 different parties involved with that one lease. A lot of times you have the financing company, if they didn't qualify. So you'll have a financial company tied to that. You'll have the issuing lease company, whether it's Hero or Pace or what have you, tied to it. And then you have a monitoring company as well. And a lot of people forget about the monitoring company because they're really nowhere. But the seller knows that they have access to monitoring. It tells them how much production they get, how much they produced at peak times, how much they used at peak times, et cetera. And it'll send them monthly and weekly updates to email, et cetera. Most forget to tell people about that so they can switch it over. And then the new buyer comes in and the old seller is still getting those updates, right? So if there's a lease, there's always going to be 3 people, and there's always going to be at least 2, sometimes 3 parties involved. If they own it outright, there's still a monitoring system that's there as well, that is automated as well. So, don't forget when you're selling a property with solar that exists.
Again, I want to remind you of my earlier conversation. I said that as badly as we would love to take on full responsibility for solar and potentially, those are products, if we have to go knee deep in something, obviously there's a junk fee for that. There's junk fees, from title companies. And I don't mean junk meaning they aren't real fees, but additional charges that you incur by needing other things. We're always looking for product. If we could do it better, we would certainly try. But right now it is just what it is. So I want to remind you that out of 3 of those situations, your escrow company is not going to be a support to you. Although we'll always walk you through it. We'll always figure out where you are today and what comes next, and even pick up the phone. We just don't always have a lot of luck, any more luck than you do. And one more thought. Solar companies, insurance companies, pest control companies, none of those are obligated to be on our timeframes at all. So just because we are supposed to close or we're going to lose our lock or anything like that, that has no bearing. It's not an emergency to them, not in any way. So you need to get started early. And I'd like to open it up for questions. I'm curious what Sam's thinking over there.
Well, before we go into questions, there were a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
Daryl did put a statement in there. Some power companies charge an annual grid tie-in fee. Yes, most of them do. And so he said, I will typically call the power company to ask about this fee. because it's not always disclosed very well. Wendy had said, I had solar issues with a bad roof in escrow. It was super challenging. And that's another thing. You know, if there's solar on the roof, during your home inspection, make sure you're using a home inspector that's willing to physically get on the roof, or get a roofing company out there to inspect, right? Because there can be a lot of underlining issues there, depending on the roof, right? I think that's caught up on everybody in regards to the statements on chat.
What you got for us, Sam?
A couple of quick things. If you look in your current contract, RPA, as I posted in there, RPA, I believe it's 8, section 5, it actually does already call out that you have to be able to discuss, they have to disclose regarding the leasing for both solar, water systems, anything along those lines. So it is in the contract already, but the big changes when we get our new contracts later this year, the ones you and I have seen the drafts of, timeframes are already getting shortened, and everything is going to need to be front loaded, very much the way they do it in Northern California. We're going to need to have all the disclosures, all the information packaged up, and that's a huge mind shift that agents are going to need to start working on this year, that you have to have everything ready to go before you even enter a contract. And these times are going to get tighter and tighter. So we're going to have this issue where we're going to have these questions and relationships with the clients, definitely finding out more and more about the solar. I believe you're going to have that, the slide that Tommy had available. We've got to just basically, I would plaster that all over anything in Southern California regarding real estate to help educate. I believe everybody needs to know who's responsible so we can start getting this a little bit easier. Because I agree with Tommy, this is going to become a bigger and bigger issue this year.
Oh, yes. And all of those things that we shared are in the chat. If anybody came in after I posted them in the chat, you may not see them. Let me know. I'll repost them again. But they're all in the chat for you as well.
I had to step out for a call, so if you could, that would be amazing.
Part of the reason that I chose as a broker to use the language any leased or liened items was, one, it matches that part of the contract, and yet I'm not accidentally negotiating a solar that I didn't mean to negotiate either. Leased or lien leaves that loose, and then the seller has an obligation when he counters to tell you what leased or liened items you're going to be negotiating. I've had a water softener after close, a full $12,000 whole house water softener, and then all those little companies like ADT that won't let one guy off unless the new guy signs, and that sort of thing. So I chose to say leased or liened items need to be disclosed in the same as per paragraph 14, and that the seller is to pay anything that comes up from there. Later, if you decide you want to accept it, at least I've put you in a position, because very often the listing agent's going to call you with his mistake and say, well, nobody knew. Okay, so you are forewarned that if you add that clause, you'll go, oh no, see my clause right there. Anything that's popping up out of the woods, I've already agreed to, is the seller's going to pay it. Now, like I said, everything's negotiable. They may come back to you with a deal you can't resist, and you're going to take them up on it. But this is one way to stop that call where they tell you, oops, because it happens so often with solar.
Yeah.
Tracy, you have any thoughts for us today? I know we're all working while I may have caught her.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I put in the chat, great job, Mary Jane and Tommy. Appreciate all the insights and information. I have a number of people that weren't able to make the actual presentation here, so I will be sending the recording once I receive it from you, Mary Jane. So great job, and Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you.
All right.
So next week on the 13th, it's recurring cause. On the 20th, 10 ways to speed up an escrow. And on the 27th, MJ will be doing an RPA refresh course. So that gets us through the end of the month.
I want to talk about procuring costs next week. I am literally bringing in the president of CAR risk management, and she was the previous forms manager, Nikki Koppa. Her day job, because those car jobs are volunteer jobs, but her day job is the head of compliance for Century 21 Award, all 7 branches statewide. She is truly an expert. She knows why the forms got written the way they do. But more importantly, the same reason we did this solar one was because it comes up often enough. We want to, very often an agent will call us and need everything that we just said compacted into a 2-minute conversation, and it can't be done. So I want to create something that I can say, watch this, and then we can take it from wherever you're stuck. The saddest call that I take as a broker or in any of my roles is I lost a deal to somebody else who it was stolen from me. And I want immediate broker action to make them write me my check today. And because that can't happen, because first of all, you can't even have a procuring cost case unless you close escrow, because there's no deal at all unless you close. And then how to take action now, how to set up your records perfectly, and then how to take it all the way to the mat is what we're going to talk about next week. Okay, so I purposely am creating something, a permanent record, where you can hear real experts who care about you and who have sympathy for those. It's the one call. All I can do is give you 45 minutes to cry on my shoulder, because it's very unlikely, even in a successful procuring cost case, that you're going to get the full amount. So we're going to talk all about that next week. It's very important. But we have Nikki Koppa, from current president of risk management from CAR, and immediate past president of risk management. No, I said that backwards. But so I'd really love to see you all.
Yeah, mark your calendar. Same time, same place. Wednesday, 12:30. Same Zoom link. Next week's going to be a good one.
And then the week after that, I think we updated her title a little bit. I think it's 21 tips for 21 or something like that. I'm sorry. Let me have you say it. Sam.
Give it to us, Sam.
It's going to be 21 tips for 2021 from a TC, all the different things that I can see to help expedite your escrow. And if you listen to me, I typically can save my agents 3 days in their closings and their time frames.
And then by August, we're going to be into the new contract. It's going to be a heck of a winter. This next, we'll get through this one, and then next year we get a new contract.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? Or please remember, I always have my phone number posted there. I put Justin Lonson from the solar company's number in there. I put this little 2-page thing to give your seller what the obligations are to do. And by the way, you could mark that up, make it nice. By the way, I know Sam will. So if there's anything else we can do for you, we would sure love to hear from you. And that's on behalf of Tommy and Tracy and I.
Yeah, thank you guys. Hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. Hope you had a great new year. Please be safe out there. And we look forward to seeing you guys all next week.
We stay on the line for about 5 minutes after, always. So if you guys have questions, you want to stay on, talk about anything else, we're here. So other than that, this will conclude the solar recording today.
Good job.
All right.